Hello and welcome to Page and Screen with John Paul Sarney. I'm quite chuffed to have as my guest today a colleague of mine who is funny and kind and a wonderful cook, and she writes all of the things, including two television series that we are developing together as we speak. She's a New York Times bestselling author of four novels and the creator of the PBS masterpiece series Victoria. Her newest book, Diva, is out now in softcover and is absolutely sumptuous. Please welcome to the program, Daisy Goodwin.
Hi, very pleased to be
Hi,
here.
nice to see you. Welcome back. You've just come back from a bit of a book tour. You've just been in Australia, right?
Yeah, I was at the Adelaide Writers' Week, which was fantastic. It's a really great event because it's completely free. So you get thousands of people turning up to the sessions. And I don't think I've ever had such a big crowd or so many books. So, you know, it was worth the very, very long way. It was worth a very long flight to get there.
Well, amazing. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about the beginnings of this, because this book came out about a year ago, and we'll have to talk about the London launch, which was very fabulous in its own right. But to get into the world of Maria Callas and this interest for you, did you always have an interest in opera? Was it about her? Was it about her divaness? What sucked you into her orbit and said this is a novel. This has to be its own world.
Well, I mean, her voice was the trigger, obviously. I mean, I listened to her since I was a child. And so I'd always her voice was in my head all my life. And it's kind of, to some extent, the soundtrack of my life. So, other people listen to The Cure. I was listening to Maria Callas and The Cure, obviously. And, um, and then in lockdown, I just started thinking about Maria Callas, in a slightly different way. I don't know what it was, but I watched a very good documentary about her called Maria in Her Own Words. And it's made by a sort of super fan who just collected all the archive of Maria that there was. And there's a lot of her speaking, not enough of her singing, but a lot of her speaking. And he sort of cut it together to tell the story of her life. And I watched it and I thought, oh my God, this is such a fantastically interesting woman. And then I started trying to read about her and I got very frustrated because all the biographies I read were either sort of written by opera buffs. So they were all about, oh, she didn't hit the high E flat here, or, her vibrato was uncontrolled in the middle of Aida, or whatever it was. And they were just basically nitpicking about the way she sang. Or I read books which were basically about her private life and really just about her affair with Aristotle Onassis, who was this fantastically rich Greek guy who, in the end, jilted her to marry Jackie Kennedy. And so, and I couldn't find anything that kind of combined the two that actually wrote about this musical genius, and how she lived her life and, sort of tried to incorporate the singer with the woman. And I thought, well, I want to do that. But then when I looked into the facts around Callis, the sort of biography, if you were to write a biography, how would you do it? I realized that the facts were so unclear and so kind of mired in, myth making. I thought, I don't have the patience for that. I'm going to write a novel because at least with a novel, I know I can make it true to how I see her. And how I see her is well, a, a genius living her life. And I think that the way that she's judged has been, she's been judged by different standards. She's been judged either as a kind of somebody purely musically or as a woman who somehow, hasn't lived up to the mark. But as a musical genius, I think she's extraordinary. I think she's somebody who came from nowhere, exploded onto the world, when she was about 22. And from then on, she was the most famous opera singer in the world until her death. And she changed the way that people looked at opera. She made opera actually about acting as opposed to just being about singing. And she brought a kind of intensity and authenticity to her work, which I think is unparalleled. And so I just wanted to really get at that. And the other thing, of course, that really attracted me to Maria, and I think it's the same for all the women I write about, is that she had a very difficult relationship with her mother, which is something that I can relate to. And so I was always interested in the sort of the disconnect which I felt with her between the sort of public persona and the inner insecurity. So that's a kind of very potent cocktail when you're a novelist. And I loved every moment of writing about Maria.
Well, it's an incredible life, and it really is her own life is truly operatic. And it's really remarkable what you do, not just in the story of her life, but also the dialogue of everyone, which you write so well always, whether it's fiction or imagining these people. But as part of the research, I was just so impressed with all of the sort of cultural detail that you had in here. That she was, oh, there was Marlena Dietrich at the party, and she's going to send chicken soup tomorrow, and what is the tile around the pool on the Onassis yacht, and all these sorts of things. How did you get into all of that kind of research? Because this is a was a completely different world. This is a very, kind of old, an old a glamour of the mid-20th century that we don't really have anymore. So how did you dig into all of that?
Oh, well, that was the hard part, obviously, JP. I had to visit every opera house in Europe and eat at Maxim's. And, well, I mean, I'm a historian by training, and I notice details. And, I'm very, very interested in the sort of stuff of history, what people wore, what they ate, what it smelt like, what their bathrooms were like, all that kind of stuff. Because I think that really gives you a sense of, you know, you often read about the past as if it's a collection of sort of battles or dates or whatever, but I'm really interested in, what people have for breakfast, and were their clothes comfortable? Did they drink tea or did they drink coffee, or stuff like that. And for Maria, it was fantastic because I found that that mid-century sort of 1950s Italy, and 1950s Italy in America was just a great place. And she lived right at the center of, I suppose, what we'd call cafe society now. And she was going from opera house to opera house, but she was also hanging out with, I mean, the jet set of the day. I think they were called the jet. That's where the jet set word came from. But they were on their yachts. They went to sort of balls in Venice. Everybody knew each other. They were sort of mixture of European aristocrats, movie stars, tycoons, and I think they were sort of more cohesive bunch than they are now. And they clearly had a very sort of glamorous time. And Maria was kind of a prize for these people. So, you know, uh, the reason that Maria meets Aristotle Onassis is because Onassis has hired a woman called Elsa Maxwell, who's one of those bizarre characters you now can't believe was actually existed. She was a kind of 5 foot woman of surprising ugliness, who became the most important social arbiter of her day. I mean, the thing is amazing. But anyway, and he paid Elsa to kind of befriend Maria and give a party where they could meet. And she did. Elsa did. What the tragedy for Elsa was that Elsa, who was gay, fell madly in love with Maria. And of course, the moment that Maria met Onassis, that's when that sort of relationship went into play. And Elsa was sort of left out. She no longer had access to Maria.
And she was amazing. I mean, she made appearances on the Tonight Show, and like she was, sort of a professional gossip, but very much embedded into the world of all these people. So it was quite the mix. So she's an amazing character,
She's an amazing
and
character.
you write her.
I mean, I was so amazed when I found her, because she was like, she came from nowhere in Iowa, and she started off playing the piano for silent movies, and she was just a brilliant piano player. And somehow she parlayed that into becoming this, the hostess. And if you weren't invited by Elsa Maxwell to some do, then you were socially in Ultima Thule. So I don't know how she did it. It was amazing. I mean, the south of the the Monaco, the Grimaldis hired her to put the south of France on the map, and she did. I mean, she was, yeah, it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, and a great life to write about, and a great sort of foil for Maria.
Well, I mean, it's all such an amazing world, and I must say that I talk to a lot of authors. I know a lot of authors, and I've been to a lot of book launch events. And usually, it's a tidy little affair in the corner of a lovely local bookshop. The launch event for this, which so kindly invited me to, was at the V&A, and you played to begin, it was in the theater at the V&A. You played a clip of Maria Callas, and you had an incredibly talented young opera singer there as well to perform a couple of numbers as part of the talk.
Yeah, that was amazing. She was actually Josephine Goddard, she's called. She's actually my singing teacher. Because I felt that I couldn't really write about Maria unless I'd had singing lessons. Because if you don't know what it's like to open your mouth and create this incredible noise, I don't think you can write about it with conviction. And she was amazing. She actually taught me to sing. And, now I feel quite confident. I can go to any church or any event and sing happy birthday or, whatever it is, Herald Angels sing at the top of my voice and hit all the high notes. So I'm feeling very proud of myself. In fact, there was a moment when I thought, oh, God, maybe instead of writing about Maria, I can actually become Maria Callas. And I said to Josie, I'm launching my book at La Scala in Milan. Do you think I should sing? And she just looked at me and went, maybe a few more, centuries of lessons before we do that. Anyway, I
Well,
don't
no,
own it.
it's a completely whole other world, and the thing about it is, I mean, it's yes, there's the mid-century, glamour of it all, but then also just opera in general. I mean, we see operas around, especially, in certain cities in Europe and places like Germany and Italy, but we don't have anyone that is, quite this level of diva anymore. I mean, there are great opera singers, there are people like Renee Fleming and people around, but no one is quite this famous anymore. It's a bygone sort of thing. I mean, do you think this was a product of Maria herself, or was it the moment in time when the paparazzi were sort of being invented and there was such interest in the world of the rich and famous?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think opera was a bigger deal. I think that there was less music generally. I mean, she comes onto this thing just before. I mean, she's pre Elvis, really. I think the reason she became so famous was that not only was she a great singer, she was a great actress, but she also looked the part. I mean, she had this incredible transformation in the early 50s where she lost 60 pounds and she went from being, you know, large. I mean, she was 5'9" and I don't know, 220 pounds, and she lost 60 pounds, so whatever that is. And she became, movie star slender, and she learnt how to dress. And from then on, whenever she was in public, she looked like a film star. And although she wasn't beautiful, 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 I mean, in the way that you would expect her. I mean, well, she was beautiful, but she looked great from on stage, and she knew how to hold her head and move her hands, so she looked fantastic in photographs. And I think those iconic photographs. I mean, there are lots of photographs of her which are incredible and are still, you know, inspiring designers and people today. I think that had a great deal to do with her success, that she became the first opera singer in a way to become a brand. Um, what we would now call a brand, and there was definitely a sort of callous look, and people knew who she was, and they could just recognize her by the profile, by the lips, by the this. And I think also, she had a sort of intensity that you very rarely see. And, most stars today are completely media trained. Maria Callas wasn't like that at all. She was an absolute, she was like a human whirlwind. I mean, she was the weather. Once you got her on a sofa, it didn't matter what she was saying. I mean, she might be saying, I don't care about Mr. Onassis, but you knew that she wanted to strangle him, So she was great, great. She was just great copy. She was great. you know, material, and people responded to that. I mean, she was electric in everything she did.
Is it, am I remembering this correctly, that there was some sort of litigation that happened between her and a pasta maker because they were trying to take credit for the change in her figure? Like, there was a very funny little bit that I
Oh,
actually looked
it
up
was
after reading the book in Time magazine.
it's hilarious. So she she lost all this weight, 60 pounds, and she did it on a diet of steak tartare and green salads. And I mean, there's a lot of
Naturally.
speculation that she took a tapeworm, she did this, she did that. You've got to remember she was a singer. She would have done nothing that she thought was going to hurt her voice. So I'm pretty sure that she did it as she said she did. She had incredible willpower after all. Here's a woman who practices 5 hours a day. But after she lost the weight, pasta manufacturer put up an investment saying, Maria Callas lost all this weight eating our pasta. And Maria was furious. I mean, as she might well be, because probably the one thing she wasn't doing was eating pasta. She's probably feeling really annoyed about that. So she sues them, and it goes on and on and on, and she sues this guy through all the courts. And in the end, she's granted a papal audience, and she goes to see the Pope. And the Pope says to her, because the man who was making the pasta was just turned out to be the Pope's nephew. And the Pope said to her, you know, Madam Callis, it'd be really good if you could maybe drop the suit. And she refuses. So I mean, you've got to love her for that. She's not going to be intimidated by anyone, no man, especially not the Pope.
I love it. It was so funny because I thought, "Oh, this couldn't possibly be true," but if you start, Googling some of this stuff, it's really remarkable, especially to read about it in the parlance as it was written in 1957 or whatever year it was. Um, well, this is, I mean, it's amazing to have completed this because this is now some time ago, but, anytime you put out a book, it is quite the long journey, and the press tour, and you've now just come back from Australia, all these things, but you and your tradition of writing about these amazing women, you're entering 2 new mediums kind of as we speak. The first of which is you have a new book that you are releasing on Substack.
Yes.
So can you tell us about
Well,
that? And we're friends on Substack. I'm so happy that we're friends on
we're
Substack.
such friends on Substack. Well, I just had this sort of mad idea that it would be, what would happen if, Elizabeth Bennet, heroine of Pride and Prejudice, were to meet Emma Woodhouse, heroine of Emma, two of my favourite novels by Jane Austen. And I just suddenly started thinking about this, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to start writing it. And you know how it is. Well, maybe you don't know how it is, but for me, usually writing is quite hard work. But with this, it was just literally slipping out of my fingers, cascading out of my fingers onto the screen. And I thought, oh, this is fun. And this year is the 250th anniversary of Austen's birth, death, I think. Anyway, it's an anniversary, big anniversary year, and there are lots of Austen books coming out. And so I thought, well, if I try and just publish this, I'll miss the boat. So I tell you what, I've just gone on Substack. I'll try and do this as a kind of, as a bit of a sort of jeu d'esprit. I will publish it by chapters and publish it in installments on Substack. So so far I've published 3 chapters, and I'm going to try and publish them weekly. I don't know if I'll actually, there may be some gaps, but I'm trying to publish them weekly, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's a bit of a leap in the dark for me because I don't quite know. I haven't plotted it all out in advance, but I know who the characters are, and I've got some ideas. So fingers crossed it will work. And so far, people have been very nice about it, and people are sort of commenting, and I love that because when you're a writer and you sit alone in a room and you're writing away, what you really want is someone to say, "God, this is good, this is brilliant, I want more." And so this is my sort of tragic way of um, getting people to applaud as I write.
Well, as you know, I began to read it and then I realized that I probably need a bit more background on this. And as I confessed to you on the phone the other day, I have not read the Jane Austen books. I've seen so many of these movies
Yeah.
over the last decades, but I've never read the books. And so you were saying how wonderful it is that I haven't, and what a great treat that's going
Yeah.
to be. So I need to read at least a couple of these books before I make my first trip to see you in June in
And
Bath,
yeah, and
which is
Bath. We know
the
what's happening in Bath, don't we? Yes.
yes, we do, because you have another big night out, that I've been invited to, which is very kind of you. So tell us what's going on. It's at the Theatre Royal Bath? Is that
It's
where
the
it is?
Theatre Royal Bath, and I've written my first play, and it's called By Royal Appointment, and it's about the late Queen Elizabeth, her dresser, and her designer, and her hat maker, her milliner. And the idea is it's a sort of journey through the Queen's life, through her clothes. And that sounds like an odd way of doing it, but actually, it's I suppose what it's about. It's about soft power. It's about how the Queen, who was completely poker face, famously never expressed any emotion in public ever. It's about how she said what she really thought through her clothes. And it's also about, the people that surround the Queen, her courtiers, but it's also about the sort of Queen in her closet, not, in the sort of ancient sense of in her sort of private world where she can be herself, where she can put on lipstick, where she's kind of, undoing her girdle. So it's sort of the Queen undressed in a way. I mean, that sounds saucier than it is, but it's the Queen backstage. And I've had so much fun writing it, and we're about to go into rehearsals, and I'm very, very nervous about it. But I think it's a way of looking at the Queen that you haven't seen before. I mean, you may have watched The Crown, you've seen all of that, but this isn't about the politics. This is about the person, and it's about a woman in particular. So, you know, it's about a woman who's getting older. It's about why, for example, she always wears these really bright colors. Why is she doing that? It's because it's not about fashion. It's about so that people, when they go out to see the Queen, they can be sure that they've seen her because she's that little spot of bright pink or bright turquoise or whatever it is. They know they've seen the Queen because that's kind of vital. Um, and it's been so much fun to do. I mean, I love fashion, I love clothes, and sort of getting into it has been a real joy. And now I can't wait to see it on stage. And I've got wonderful actors, and fingers crossed, break a leg or whatever we say.
Well, and because you're now working in so many different mediums, I mean, when you have the idea to begin something new, a new project, does your brain immediately start with a novel or a TV series, or does it mix about? I mean, how do you know how you want to tell a story?
Oh, that's a really interesting thing. Well, it's usually, I mean, with Victoria, I'd started as a novel and it turned into a screenplay very quickly. For me, the transition from novel to screenplay is pretty organic because I think in pictures and I love writing dialogue. So I don't really have an issue with that. I mean, I could almost go in either direction. I mean, the problem with screen is that you need much more plot than you would for a novel. I mean, a novel, you can get away with a few things happening, but with TV, a TV hour has to have enough plot for about seven novels. Because you're getting so much more information from the actors, and that is, that's a challenge, but it's fun. I mean, both are fun. When I'm writing a screenplay, it's great because you know that it's going to be made so much better by the actors. But when I'm writing a novel, I think, oh yeah, if I want to have 350,000 people walk on now, I can because no one's going to say we don't have the budget for that. So it's wonderful. So you have freedom, and advantages on both sides, and I love writing both actually. Um, in my experience, you get a lot more notes when you're writing a screenplay than you do when you're writing a novel, and a lot more. And sometimes
Not from me, by the way,
no,
never
no,
from
no, no,
me.
no, 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 no. When you get notes when you're writing a novel, when you're writing a screenplay, you can sometimes think, "Oh, you know, expletive deleted." And when you get and then notes on your novel, you just sometimes say, "Come on, give me some, say what you really think." So it's quite interesting. And they're very different approaches.
Well, it's nice. I mean, also the editorial process is great because the world of books. We talk about this a lot on this program, but the world of books, just keeps expanding, especially now with things like book talk. I mean, there's such excitement all over the world for books and publishing and more publishing and limited editions and all the rest of it. As you and I know all too well, the challenges of getting a television show financed are a whole different,
Yeah,
it's a
whole
whole
different
different can of
ballgame.
worms.
Yeah, no, I mean the barriers to entry are much lower with books, and with Substack now, anyone can write a book if they want to, and people
Right.
can read it. I mean, I think that's great. I think democratization is great, and I don't really care what people are reading so long as they're reading something. Well, obviously, I'd like them to be reading my books, but what I'm saying is, I think it's great that people are still reading, and we've talked about the demise of the book, but actually people love reading still, and that is fantastic. And I think the more people read, the more they can sympathize with other people. And let's face it, that's what we need, is trying to kind of put ourselves into other people's heads occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all the things that to promote real quick. So we have on Substack, it is the Pemberley Papers,
The
right?
Pemberley Papers. If you type in the Pemberley Papers or type in Daisy Goodwin Substack, and it will come up. I'm about to publish chapter 4, I think. So there's enough there, and at the moment it's free. So there are no barriers to entry at all. I mean, hopefully at some point I might start charging, but right now it's totally free. And I also do a newsletter as well, but it's really about the novel. And
Amazing. And then the play at Theatre Royal Bath, people
that's
can
it.
buy tickets
Go to what
online.
Bath. It's doing a national tour, so it's going to Bath, Southampton, Richmond, Guildford, uh, Cheltenham, Leeds. So it's going all over the country, and it starts in June and ends at the end of July. And yeah, no, it's going to be really special. So if you're interested in anything royal, you're interested in clothes, you're interested in the way that women's lives have changed, all these things, then it's really worth seeing.
And then finally, if people want to buy Diva or any of your other 3 books, where do you send people when they come to London? What is the bookshop that you like to send people to?
Oh, well, I love Daunt's. I think Daunt's is a wonderful, wonderful shop. And I love John Sandow, which is just off, it's a small independent bookseller, which is just off the King's Road. And it's fantastic. If you haven't been there and you're going to London, it's an absolute delight. I'm not absolutely sure they've got all my books in stock, but if you go in and ask for them, they will get them, and you will be very happy to have gone there because it's a fabulous, fabulous shop.
Amazingly, I've never been there,
Oh,
which is
dude, you
surprising
you
for
need
me.
to get in there. It's a shop of dreams, and of course Hatchard's. I love Hatchard's on Piccadilly. Those are my two favourite shops. I mean, Hatchard's is an institution. I've done talks there, and they have lots of books signed by the authors, so you can actually pick up books that will go up in value. They also have some wonderful modern first editions, and it's a glorious, glorious shop. So, those are my top tips.
It's actually, as you know, always stay in the same place in London, and it's walking distance to Hatchard's, which is the oldest bookshop in London, I think from 1797, if I'm not mistaken. And then I also have Foyles and Waterstones on either side. So if someone doesn't have it, then you can just, go down the road.
And then, and
But
then, and then you go to Fortnum& Mason's, Britain's oldest grocer, for some restorative tea. So you've got the whole
yes,
thing.
as you and I have done with our
Yeah,
big baskets,
we
just
certainly have. Yeah,
scooping things up.
certainly have.
That was one of my favorite, development, meetings that I had was with you. We had to talk about script notes, and we went to Fortnum& and Mason.
Yeah, it's the only way to go.
There are worse things.
They really are.
Well, Daisy Goodwin, thank you so much for coming by and talking about all the things that you're up to. It's lovely to see you as ever, and I'm sure I'll see you in a few weeks.
Oh, well, I can't wait, JP, and, thank you so much for having me on your wonderful, wonderful podcast.
Thank you, Daisy. Talk to you soon.